Hey everyone, welcome to Be Our Guest, a new virtual happy hour interview series. My name is Janki. I am the artistic director of Live and in Color. We are a not-for-profit theater based both in New York and Connecticut. Our mission is to develop new plays and musicals that promote and celebrate diversity. While in-person programming is on pause, we are happy to be offering more virtual programming to our audiences like this interview today. I also want to mention this is our month of giving, and we have just received, very exciting news, a matching grant from the For Good Foundation, and any donations made before the end of June will be matched up to $10,000. All proceeds go directly to supporting our artists as we create platforms and showcase underrepresented voices. So to find out more about us and to donate, check out our website, theaterincolor.org. So now, grab a cocktail. And if you have any questions for our special guest, please leave them in the comments, and please share this interview with your friends on Facebook on their pages so they can also ask some questions. Now I want to introduce an acclaimed host, speaker, advocate, entrepreneur. She made history in 2014 when she became the first contestant of Indian descent to win Miss America. Please welcome the stunning Ninadavuluri.
Hello.
Hi. Cheers. Welcome. How are you?
I'm so good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, it's such a pleasure to have you. Where are you calling in from?
I am currently in Syracuse, New York.
And everything good for you out there?
Everything is good. I'm here with my rescue pup, Dobby, hence my little Hedwig mug. If you guys I'm a Harry Potter fan. So yeah, I'm at least able to get outdoors and staying safe.
Good. And I know a lot of your projects, as many of us, have been put on hold because of the quarantine. What have you been doing with your time?
Yeah, well, thankfully we've been able to regroup and kind of work around the quarantine, I suppose, or make the best of it. I've been working on a documentary called Complexion, and it's about really unpacking this idea of skin color, colorism, and how that affects every culture and community around the world. So obviously being South Asian and Indian, we certainly did start with the India chapter, and that was the last place we filmed, was in India and Bangladesh. And so we started releasing episode drops that live on my social media as well as YouTube. For people to kind of get a teaser of what's to come and really just start the conversation around it. But you know, like so many people, we were supposed to be shooting in Kenya and Nigeria, and we're supposed to actually be releasing a preview at Cannes Film Festival, which all of that is on hold. But thankfully, we've been still able to spread the message, which has been incredibly timely.
Well, since we're there, can you talk a little bit about the inspiration for the documentary? Because it's really, all the stuff I've seen is just so wonderful and so needed.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so it actually just started because of my own experiences growing up in a South Asian household, just around skin color. In many countries around the world, the lighter skin you are, the more beautiful you're considered in terms of beauty standard. But also, really, as we dive deeper into this conversation, it really is about class, socioeconomic status, careers, jobs. That really, this ideology of lighter skin is better, is ideal, infiltrates so many aspects of Indian culture, and again, like I said, many cultures. And so really asking the question, why does this exist? Where does this come from? We see it play out around the world. But there is a common thread that connects us all. And so really trying to understand the point of view from other people who are living this, I should say people who are living this, and their backstories, and showcasing that this is an important conversation to be had. This is a form, colorism is a form of racism, and that exists across the world.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful that you and your team are doing this, because it's I've also all been sort of interested in the idea of what we find beautiful, and what is attractive to people. And I've actually heard you talk in other interviews about this, about within our own culture, being brown people, the idea of being lighter is more beautiful than dark skin.
Yeah. And it's so interesting when sometimes I've said that here, and people will say, "Oh my gosh, I loved your skin tone." People spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on tanning packages, and that's an entire billion-dollar industry here, is tanning products and bronzers, spray tans, etc. And so that conversation, just going back and forth, has been really interesting too. And growing up, you hear things from our culture: don't go out in the sun, you're going to get too dark. And when you look at Bollywood, it's an entire industry that are light skinned. And I just remember, even for myself, the morning after I won Miss America, the conversation that was happening in India was, is Miss America too dark to be Miss India? And so this is just something that's deeply seated in our culture. And finally, I feel like people are having the conversation and ready to listen.
And speaking of having the conversation, your platform at Miss America was cultural competency. Can you talk a little bit more for our viewers about what that means, and when you talk about it, why that's important?
Yeah, it's crazy that this was 6 years ago when I won, and
now?
It was relevant then. It's even more relevant now. But the idea behind cultural competency is really understanding someone's background and where they come from and why they believe in what they believe. And so, I grew up being asked questions: what the red dot means, if I worship cows, am I going to have an arranged marriage? And the list goes on. And I think a lot of remarks weren't necessarily meant to be malicious, but really simply due to the fact of ignorance. And so that was something that was important to me, to really, we live in America, is the melting pot of the world. New York is the melting pot of the world. And in order to build a more inclusive society, we just have to be open and have these conversations. And so that was really the core behind it.
Wow. At Live in Color, we're always trying to create opportunities that create more representation on the American stages. When you won Miss America in 2014, you made so many young people feel seen and heard and represented. I remember actually crying when you won. It was so meaningful. Were you aware that you were having such an impact?
That's, first of all, like, every time someone says that, it's just so touching. So thank you. But I knew that it would be a moment. Like, I went in wanting to be the first Indian American and South Asian to win the title. You grow up, it's so interesting because the Miss America theme song, even that in itself, there's so many underlying issues. But it's, there she is, Miss America, your ideal, walking on air she is, fairest of fair she is. And this is like a song back at, like, we're approaching our 100th year, so we're old. But to be a part of an organization, to just even think that only allowed white women to compete, and to think about the evolution from the first Black Miss America, who was Vanessa Williams, watching her story, her trajectory, and then kind of moving on to, not necessarily moving on, there's still a huge disproportionate amount of Black women and women of color who even compete in the organization. But kind of still having firsts, right? Like, there's still a first South Asian. There still has yet to be a first East Asian. we've had a first Filipina Miss America. And so I just think that we're still in the process of firsts, which is
Yeah.
it's 2020 and it's sad, but that's true. And so to represent an organization that had all this history and was kind of iconic to what was America, to what was representative of America, I knew changing that or shifting what that looked like was certainly going to have an impact. And I don't think I realized just with social media, how much people were going to have to say
Well,
about it.
that's what I was going to ask you about next. Like, I don't want to dwell too much on it, but all the backlash was just crazy. But can you talk a little bit about that and how you process that? And
yeah, and I think it's unfortunate. It's easy to hide behind a handle, and people said incredibly xenophobic comments about my race, my culture, my background. I was called a terrorist. There was a lot of Islamophobic comments that were happening that I saw, and I took it as an opportunity to say, hey, this is why my platform is relevant. This is why we need to start having this conversation. And so for me, it was an opportunity to educate. But thinking back, and I actually had talked to Vanessa Williams right after I had won, because sadly she had experienced this. We won 20 years apart.
yeah.
And sadly, she experienced the very same things that I experienced, if not, and on a higher level, on a much deeper level. She was receiving death threats and continued to. So these issues are sadly incredibly relevant and have happened over and over again. I just think that now people are aware of it because they see it more often than when they did in the past.
And speaking of social media, I mean, you're pretty outspoken about, how we can use social media for good. And do you have any like suggestions to people to how they can use it for positive and make it a form of activism?
Yeah, I've definitely seen so much happening, especially with the death of George Floyd and the conversations about race and policy and police brutality that are happening. I see so many young people being active, and that's wonderful. It's a great resource. It's a great way to spread messages. I think the other part that we don't see is what's happening behind social media. Yes, we all know that it's a great resource. Unfortunately, sometimes, there are trends that happen that people jump on the bandwagon, but are they actually looking inwards? So while it's great to spread resources and have these conversations, I think it's more important that we look inwards, look at our homes, talk with our parents, our families. I think this is a huge thing that's happening right now within the South Asian community, is addressing racism in our own homes that certainly exist. And so I hope that that's something that beyond that, we take it a step further.
Well, you have so many amazing projects that all sort of interlinked. You recently co-founded the all-natural skincare line, Rani, inspired by Indian ancient beauty rituals. What inspired you to get into the beauty business?
Yeah, I did found it. I'm actually no longer involved with it because there were so many things that I knew I wanted to do with complexion. And I think really the impetus behind it was that I saw so many skin lightening and whitening creams and products. And what I loved about helping, being an entrepreneur and helping launch a brand, I realized is storytelling. And so, just understanding that so many people were sharing their stories with me about their complexion, and knowing just from my hundreds of conversations from my college university tour, from literally community college to Harvard, which again, like none is better than the other. You do you. Like, I was just grateful to be at any of them and speak with people across the country. Skin lightening was something that just came up. Colorism was just something that came up over and over in my conversations. And so when the opportunity to really produce a documentary on a worldwide scale, I just knew that it was the right place for me to be in, is storytelling. And that's so much of what, you guys do too. Like, I hope that people realize, especially people of color, that we have to tell our own stories. And yes, I'm not saying that other people can't, but we've lived it and we have to be able to share it. And it's just so powerful.
Well, speaking of telling stories, I mean, you've been telling your story in many different ways. And I know last year we had the honor of having you at our fundraiser for Live and in Color in Connecticut at Broadway on the River, which you sang. We were fabulous.
That was nice. I was so nervous for this. I cannot tell. First of all, I have to thank you so much, because I feel like you were that mentor that I really needed at that time, because I had never sang publicly before this fundraiser, and I was like, oh, are you kidding? Like, really? And so that was just even that in itself, that confidence that I found that you had given me is something that so many people don't have. And it's our responsibility to also build that confidence for our communities. And I feel just so strongly about what you're doing, because it's so necessary.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it really was such an honor to have you. And I want to see more of you on stage. I know you've been pursuing the acting and singing more. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I finished my conservatory training, I suppose, and have now been on the audition role I finished my conservatory last August, and then kind of January and this year, 2020, has been a little difficult, but I've tried to really not make that an excuse. I think as an actor or artist, you're trying to constantly learn and hone your craft, and I've heard that a million times. I feel like I finally get it. So it is a never-ending process, and it's a discovery process that I'm trying to be patient and enjoy. So learning that self-tape life, like everyone starts somewhere. There's no shame in the game. I'm very new to this, so I'm just open to learning and seeing what comes out of it.
Well, I really hope we get to work together in that capacity very soon again, because as I said, you were just so wonderful. I'm just so impressed of how you can achieve such great success in so many different disciplines. And there's someone else I think you may know who also has a success doing this. I don't know who that might be. It's Jesse Williams.
Oh my God!
Author, public speaker, doctor of physical therapy, Survivor season 35 contestant, and Miss Virginia USA 2016. Hi, Desi.
Oh my God! Okay, you guys, I was not expecting this.
That's the idea.
That's the whole point.
I love it.
So how do you two know each other?
So, well, Nina won Miss America, and I was just a little Miss Virginia. But she and I, at Miss America, they sort of separate us all into a bunch of different hotels. And so Nina and me, and then one of our other really, really good friends, Brittany, all stayed in the same hotel at Miss America. So at the end of the day, which it seems like it's just like a beauty pageant, but the days are actually really exhausting and really long and really draining. And so we would all just kind of reconvene at the end of the day and like be able to be our real true selves and not feel like we had to be like our perfect pageant Patty selves. So that's really where Nina and I bonded.
Oh, and I know you've become great friends. When was the last time you actually saw each other in person?
I think it was at Mina and Varun's wedding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
So in Aruba.
We got her Bollywood dance on. And she was in the Sangeet. It was awesome.
I love it.
It was so fun. I wish every wedding were an Indian wedding.
And Desi, I know a few days ago was your birthday, so happy birthday.
Thank you. Reminded me another year older. You
also have an insanely interesting career, from being a physical therapy college professor to Survivor to the author of the book Love Affair with My Hair, Why Black Women Cheat on Health. There seems to be a common thread through all your work that you have this passion for health and wellness. Can you talk a little bit about what that's about?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So in most communities of color, but really specifically what's important to me is Black people. Like, we just don't emphasize health and fitness and wellness at all. And I've seen, over half of my extended family has diabetes, and they have complications related to diabetes. And so many of the conditions that are killing us at disproportionate rates really could be fixed if we just ate better and we exercised a little bit. And I feel like I'm constantly having this conversation with even my parents who don't do a good job taking care of themselves. So that passion really started for me in high school. It's been something I've been passionate about for years. But I also do some acting, I do some hosting, and the world of pageants is really what introduced me to more than just health and wellness and fitness.
Oh, well, it's also wonderful. You both had such success in pageants, which historically have been very white. And 2019 was the first year the women of Miss America, Miss Teen USA, and Miss USA were all Black. Do you see the pageant world taking steps in, by becoming more inclusive?
Do you want me to speak on this or me?
Go for it, Desi.
I think they're making efforts towards it. And it's very similar to like Barack Obama being our first Black president. Just because there's one or two or three doesn't mean the complete culture of the pageant society or the society as a whole has changed. So it's certainly a stride in the right direction. I think that they've done a great job publicizing the fact that there are so many. But like everything else, I hope it's not a trend. I hope it's not just for publicity's sake, that it really is a shift in the way we view beauty in America. And I'm not sure if we're quite there yet.
Yeah. Our mission at Live and in Color is really to connect diverse communities and create new stage works. For both of you, what does having a diverse working environment mean to you?
I'll let you go first, Neen.
Yeah, having a diverse working environment.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, you're cutting in and out. I think I do want to just also talk about pageants because that's really I guess the first time I had a real job. I know how that sounds because Miss America is like the weirdest real job in the world. But I just remember even from a cultural standpoint, I was told that I would get Christmas and Easter off. And while that's great, my family celebrates Christmas and we do the traditions around it, but obviously, I'm not Christian. And so I remember asking, can I have another holiday off instead that I celebrate? And it was a small thing like that they just assumed that was okay. So obviously, if there had been more diverse people in the office, which I still think, to answer your question on pageants, I still think is an issue within the organization. When I look at Miss America specifically, they don't have people of color in their office. They don't have any people of color in their office. I should start there, let alone any Black people in the office or on the board, to my knowledge. So I think that when people have put out statements that are saying that they're supportive, it's also, well, let's actually look at who is running your organization, who's on the board of that organization. And I think that's an incredibly important component rather than being reactionary. So I think now they're, not only Miss America, but a lot of other companies and corporations are forced to look at that. And I hope that changes.
Absolutely. And Desi?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I'm sorry, I got so involved in Nina's answer. But the question was like, how important it is to be represented.
Yeah, or being in a diverse working environment or being surrounded by diversity.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely important for us to be represented in media. And I would say what the frustration is across the board is it feels like they're trying to fill quotas. So even like in pageants, it sometimes felt like, we think this is like the year for diversity, so let's put a diverse candidate in for Miss America. In production in LA, like they have to, I think there's a mandate now where they have to call in people from different ethnic backgrounds, when realistically they know they want somebody who they consider looks like the girl next door. They want a white person to fill that role, but they're forced to bring in people of color. So at this point, it feels like they're sort of just filling a quota and really wasting our time because they're not valuing our voice. And that's not just in the realm of like the talent, but the writers have to be more diverse. The production staff has to be more diverse. The executives have to be more diverse. So I think we're in a great movement right now where we're pressing towards that, but we've got so far to go that it's hard as a person of color to not be cynical about everything that's happening right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think my big thing is like we need more leaders who are diverse, which the two of you are now, which is just so wonderful. So thank you for all the work you do. I think we have some questions from our viewers. Let's take some before. So Dennis Corsi asked,
Man, this is loaded.
If you build the Miss America pageant from scratch, how would you design it? Wow. We went through a whole other show on this.
Oh, this is so interesting. You know, we're having this conversation, I think, internally, or I hope that they are. We're approaching our 100th. And like I said, it's an organization that has so much history. And I think we need to acknowledge that. I think I'd like to, in the 100th, I'll focus on that. I would like to see the acknowledgement of all of the standpoints in history. You know, what historic moments have they had? How have they been more inclusive? How have they not been inclusive? Owning that part of the story, I think, is really important. You can't just erase it. It happened. So I think owning up to it, acknowledging it, apologizing at certain moments, which I think is necessary too. And I think that's what's going to really move us forward as an organization. And I think people need for it to be acknowledged in order for Miss America to continue to exist, to move into this era that we're moving into. So I think that's really, really the first step, I would say.
Anything from you, Dev?
Yeah. I mean, traditional Miss America is a very traditional organization. It's always felt to me like it has very conservative values, and I just don't feel like that's where America's youth in particular are today. Is we like to see things that are more progressive. We like to see things changing and transforming almost constantly. And although Miss America has so much historical context, it's important, like Nina said, to acknowledge that. At some point in time, you've got to listen to the greater masses, and you can't keep doing what you've been doing over and over and over again for years. So you've got to get younger people in, new ideas, try some new things, be a little risky. It takes risk in order to be successful.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope that happens. Do we have another question? Oh, Bob Brzezinski says, when was the first time you felt represented on screen?
Oh my God, Mindy Kaling in The Office. Like, everything about her character was so spot on. And the fact that, like, I loved her relationship with Ryan. I feel like there was so much parallel that I saw there. I love that she was darker skinned, especially after being exposed to an industry in Bollywood that was only light skinned. Like, she spoke to me. I dressed up for her as Halloween, and my boyfriend at the time, he was like, "Oh, let's be Pam and Jim." I was like, "I cannot be Pam. Like, I have to be Kelly." So he went as Jim, I went as Kelly. Needless to say, it didn't work out.
What about you, Desi?
I'm trying to think of the best, like my best example of that for some reason comes to me, The Proud Family, which I know is a cartoon and doesn't feel really like representation. The first thing that popped in my head was, what was a show with Bill Cosby? What was that called?
The Cosby Show.
The Cosby Show. Cosby Show. Initially, I thought Cosby Show, but they almost felt too like cookie cutter perfect, and that was absolutely not how I grew up. So I would say The Proud Family, because they were educated, they were still fun, and they were still a little rough around the edges. What'd you say?
It was a Disney Channel show.
Yeah, it was a Disney show.
Yeah.
But it wasn't actual actors, obviously.
Yeah.
A cartoon,
yeah.
But it felt like the first time I saw on, which I love the Disney Channel, but it was like an all-black cartoon where people were rough around the edges, but not being made fun of. Because sometimes it feels like they try to make Black people seem like clowns, and I felt like The Proud Family did a good job of being comedic without making fun of us.
Yeah. Well, and now the two of you are that for so many people. So it's really wonderful. Do we have one more question before we have to get out? Oh, Alicia, who actually is calling in from London, so it's very late there. What is your go-to karaoke song? Thank you so much. Wow.
Mine is Carrie Underwood, Before He Cheats.
Okay.
Mine is a lot less singing than that. Mine is either TLC, No Scrubs, or I Like Big Butts. So,
I love it. I want to hear you both do those. Well, we're out of time, but before we go, I want to say how proud I am of the work we do at Live and in Color. We really try to foster an inclusive environment and create platforms that showcase underrepresented voices. I really believe in my heart that the stories we tell can change hearts and minds. And I just want to say, if you can, please consider making a donation this month at our link below. You'll directly support our company and the artists. And if you donate it now, you will double your impact. All donations will be matched through the end of the month up to $10,000. So that's exciting. And also to be sure to tune in next week to be our guest when I'll be talking to Mauricio Martinez. He's amazing. He's the star of Broadway's On Your Feet and Netflix's El Vato, and he's a great friend of Live in Color. Thank you, everyone who tuned in today. Thank you, Nina and Desi, for joining me. And Nina or Desi, would you give us a little exit toast before we go? Any last words?
No, just
thank you for having us. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Oh.
It's so needed, and I know it's not easy trying to run a theater company, especially
Well,
in these times.
We're all in this together. Nina, anything?
No, that was perfect. We all are all in this together, and thank you for the surprise.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
The mornings run together. Seems like one long day. You're going through the motions. What does it matter? Does it matter anyway? Wishing things were different. When the world is cold and gray, it's the same old song that's playing, with the same old things to say. Someone should mix things up. Someone should take a chance. Someone should sing a new number. Someone should dance a new dance and change the story. Come on and change the scene. Change the beginning, the end, and in between. It's time to change the story. It's time to change the tune. See how the future looks bright. Change on the horizon. Coming soon. And suddenly you're not lonely. Burned out from 9 to 5. Suddenly you have purpose. You feel alive. Here everyone is welcome. Come in love and dignity. 'Cause when we come together, that's when we're truly free. Come on and mix things up. Come on and take a chance. Come on and sing a new number. Come on and dance. Let's change.